November Sew Fun. I'm Kathy Elsesser, the Sew Fun presenter for this month. I've also been, in fact, I was a Sew Fun presenter for the last in-store Sew Fun we had back last February. Can you believe it's been that long? And I've been behind the camera filming Sew Funs since then. And so I'm finding that I've enjoyed being behind the camera and having all that pressure off of me. And now I'm in front of the camera and it's like, oh, I don't know if I want to do this. But I do want to do it because I want to show you some of the cool stuff that we made for this November Sew Fun. Back when I started sewing all this stuff, it was probably April or May. And I realized, you know, it's November. I'm going to make Thanksgiving stuff and I'm going to make Christmas stuff. And then we started having the trunk shows in the store and realized, and plus also we were getting Sew Funs out a little later in the month, every month. And I realized, you know, the Thanksgiving stuff might be a little late in the month for you to be able to sew up. But no fear, because there's always a Thanksgiving next year. Plus, one of the table runners I'm going to show you that I did in Thanksgiving fall colors could certainly be done in any color. So we're covered no matter what. Let's get started and talk about some of the fun stuff I made for you this month. And welcome to November Sew Fun. For November, I've got you covered from head to toe with a couple of patterns that I made. The first of all is this Annie's 2 patterns, which are party slippers. And these are really cute to make and fun to make and quick. They, whoops, that might hurt. I made these in these fabrics because I was making a robe in these same fabrics. And I thought, well, that's going to be beautiful. Matching robe with slippers. However, we couldn't get the robe pattern in, and so I wasn't able to complete the robe. But I did get the slippers done. But I think also, in addition to these fun satiny fabrics that I use, you can use cotton. You can make them in Christmas slippers. Different colors of reds and greens would be cute. To make these slippers is pretty easy. You just get a flip-flop or something that you have and trace the outline of that shoe, and then cut that pattern out. And then you make a copy of it, of course, reverse, so you have a right and a left. Some people have 2 left feet, but I think you probably want a right and a left. And then you cut that out of Bosal, the double-sided fusible Bosal interfacing. We have that in the Craftex Plus, which is double-sided. And then you also cut it out of fusible fleece. And so you layer the fusible fleece with the bottom fabric, the Bosal, and then you fuse those together. And then you do the same thing for the top of the fusible fleece and the top fabric. And you can use different fabrics for the sole or the top of the slipper if you want. Before you start putting them together, then you have to bind each piece of each layer. So the Bosal with the bottom fabric, you bind it with binding, and then the top part, which is the top fabric with the fusible fleece, you bind that. And then before you fuse that all together, you put the satin ribbon in between, and then you fuse it, and then you just sew the binding together all the way around. And then these are simply just pieces of satin fabric with some fleece in between that you just tie into a square knot to finish off your slipper. I also thought you could make you could put a buckle on here, which is a little bit of adjustable buckle if you wanted to, or just use the square knot method like they suggest. So we brought in the Craftex, and then we also brought in, since it's a slipper, you want to be careful that you don't slip, and so we brought in some anti-skid fabric for the bottoms. And then since this was all kind of a black and teal, I just didn't want a big piece of white non-skid on the bottom, so I cut out little circles out of non-skid fabric and used a Sharpie to paint them black. It just kind of shows through, and they probably wear out to the white down the road. But I just thought these were really cute and would be great made up in Christmas colors. You could certainly use cotton. I used those satin finish. One of the things in sewing this satin fabric was to use some pins that didn't snag the fabric. And so we brought in these perfect pins from Karen K. Buckley. You know, she makes perfect scissors, so why not perfect pins? And these were great because they really were nice and thin and didn't pull or snag or leave big holes in these fine fabrics. So we brought those in for you as well. So these are the party slippers from Auntie's 2. So we got your feet covered, now how about your head? We brought in this pattern called the Pork Pie Pizzazz Hat. And it's just the cutest little hat. So I got some tweedy looking wool to make my hat. And it's a very simple hat to make. The brim is self-facing, so you use the same fabric on the top of the brim as the bottom. You could use different fabrics for the inside of the hat, but I made the same on the inside or outside. So it's just basically a three-piece pattern: the brim, the band, and the crown. So it goes together very quick. There's seams in the back for the brim and the band, and then of course you just have to get that circle sewn in on the top. And I just made the exact same thing on the inside, and then you just piece it together, right sides together, and sew around the brim, and then turn it. And so you have a beautiful little hat. And since I made this a little later in the fall, I was able to find this cute little black feather as part of the Halloween decorations, which I thought was perfect for the hat. The pattern, however, has a flower that you can make out of wool. And they show you how to make this cute flower that you can make out of the same wools that you're using in the hat if you want to. You can certainly make this hat out of different fabrics. I like the wool. You can make it out of suede. You can make it out of cotton. But it's just a cute little hat, and it comes together really quickly and gives your head a little bit of pizzazz. I know through the Sew Funds through this year, we've seen several projects made with cork. And in fact, I think for Christmas last year, I did some posters made out of cork even. So I really like cork fabric and find it pretty interesting. So naturally, when I saw this book, Create with Cork Fabric, it seemed like one that I would want to try some projects out of. And sure enough, it's a great book, but it's written by the lady that does Sally Tomato. So the same woman who designs the Sally Tomato patterns has got this book out. And there's several really nice projects in here that are made of cork, and not just bags. So there's some different things you can use with cork, and I'll show you those in just a second. One of the things I like about the book, too, is that she talks a lot about the benefits of cork and how to sew with cork, and just some different tools and techniques that you can use if you're working with cork, including how to match up your lining with something that you're making out of cork. In addition to bags that are in the book, there's also, for example, a storage basket made of cork, or a wreath made of cork. I know we had a wreath that we made a couple Sew Funds ago with a grapevine wreath that we put some felt embroidered flowers on, so leaves on. So you could certainly do something like that with cork leaves. I went the traditional way though and did some bags made out of cork. The first one that I made was this framed clutch purse. This is one pattern piece that you cut two pieces of, and then the lining, and you get this wonderful little clutch bag out of it. And it's very simple to make. You cut out the cork, then you sew the side seams and do the box corners for the front and the back, and the same thing for the lining, and then you glue on the frame. When I first cut it all out and was starting to push the cork and the lining up into the frame, I thought, this isn't going to fit, because the cork piece looked a little bit wider than the front, and it wasn't even shaped quite the same. But once you started putting the cork up in there, and then I had to use binder clips to hold the frame to the cork, to the glue set. But once I did all that, it fit in perfectly, it went in easily. She suggests in the book you may need to use a screwdriver to kind of push your stuff up into the frame, but I didn't have to do that. And then just let it dry for about 24 hours before you try to even move it or open it, to make sure that glue is really set. So there are some little hooks on here that if you wanted to put a chain or some kind of strap on it, you could do that. So this is the framed clutch purse. The other bag that I made out of the book is this bucket bag, and it was so easy to make. It's got a cork panel in the front and in the back, and then fabric sides, and then a cork accent that goes around the side that's going to hold the cork strap. Now I'll have to have a confession to make, because in her book she talks about cork and types of cork and what kind of cork to use. And if I had read that, I probably would not have bought the cork that I bought from Hobby Lobby, because I loved it. It was this pretty black with the gold sparkles, went perfect with my fabric. It's like, I got to get that. When I got it home, it was really, really thin. And so I thought, this is never going to hold up to wear and tear. So I interfaced it with some fusible woven interfacing on the cork. And I think that's going to stabilize it pretty well. So just be careful about the type of cork that you get. Make sure it's going to be something that's going to be really durable and thick. I know that Audrey made a beautiful purse out of cork back in the summer when she did Sew Fun. I think it was in July. And it was just gorgeous. And it was made with that really heavy cork. I did use the same cork for this clutch, the good cork for this clutch, so I feel like it's pretty sturdy. Now, what we did bring in to go with these projects is a kit that has all of the hardware that you want to use for any of the bags that you want to make in the Create with Cork Fabric book. So we brought them in gold and silver. And we also, if you don't want all that and you just want to make, for example, the clutch, we brought in the frames of the clutch purse as well as a separate item. So we have those in, and we'll have them in the stores for you and have them online to purchase to make your own cork bags. My hands are empty because the next project that I wanted to show you is this strippy tree skirt. Try to say that 3 times fast. And it's a jelly roll rug, but it's circular, and it's got a hole in the middle, so you can use it as a tree skirt. And I thought, perfect, Christmas. So here's a picture of what mine came out with, like for the first time that I made it.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like, I don't think it's supposed to look like a bell. So, it's like, well, here's what happened. We were camping. And I had my sewing machine in the camper, and I had my FOC with me, my FOC Performance Icon. And I was sewing on a little table. And as I learned later, unless you have a flat surface all the way out to the left of your sewing machine, these jelly roll rugs will warp. So I thought, okay, well that must be what happened, right? So now, when you make a jelly roll rug, you have batting, like our Cathedon on a roll. And you have a jelly roll, a full jelly roll, so that's 40 strips that you've sewn together. You've stuck the batting aside and you folded it and made the rope, right? Done all that. And then you start sewing the circle out. Well, in addition to the roll we brought in, we also brought in the batting seam tape in case you wanted to make your own batting, which is your own strip, which is actually what I did the first time. So then I thought, okay, well I need to redo this because I'm sure I'm not going to take this to sew fun. And so I made some more rope, another jelly roll. This time I got smart and I bought the batting already cut and sewed it all together and made the rope. And then I decided I'm going to get a nice flat surface and I'm going to make this thing again. And guess what? I don't have it to show you because it still looks like a bell. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And the reason I'm going ahead and showing this, even though I don't have one to show you, is I'm going to challenge you. Somebody please buy this pattern and make it and come and teach me how, because I can't figure out how you make that sucker lay flat. This being the holiday season, I was really taken by this Claudia Creations pattern called Pillow Talk. And what I really liked about it is there's these sleeves that you make, and there's one in this, it's a CD, an embroidery CD, and there's one for just about every holiday. I didn't see St. Patrick's Day, but we've got Halloween, Thanksgiving, Valentine's, Easter, July 4th, Hanukkah, and of course Christmas. And again, this being November, December, I made the fall holidays sleeves, and I made one Thanksgiving. And this is a very easy, your instructions are very good on how to make these sleeves. You embroider this panel, and then you just kind of face it with some fine fabric, and then make a sleeve out of it. And actually on the back you also do a little embroidery, a single word, and there's a single word for each one of those designs. What's really nice about this is you only need one size pillow, and then you can take the sleeve off, Thanksgiving is over, and add the sleeve for Christmas. The Christmas one has ho 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 on the back. You only have to store one pillow to get 7 different holidays worth of pillows. The pillow form that I used on this is available at Joann's in the exact size you need. 22 by 14, I believe, is the right dimensions on that. And they have that blank ready to go. So it was very easy. I just made a cover for it, kind of a neutral fabric with an invisible zipper. And I can just slide these different sleeves on to have my holiday pillow. So that is Pillow Talk by Claudia Creations. A couple years ago, I went to a sewing expo out in Atlanta with a couple of my sisters. And we took a class on making mosaics with fabric. Now, I have been a stained glass enthusiast for a long time and have made a lot of mosaics with glass, but I had never made one with fabric. So I thought, well, this is great. So I took the class, and I really enjoyed it. And so I wanted to show you a little bit about that technique and see if you might enjoy it as well. What we brought in is this mini mosaic quilt, and we brought in the Valentine heart, since actually working ahead of a holiday a little bit, ready for February. This technique is really easy takes a little bit of time because you have to position and cut out all these little squares and position them on your tableau to get this design. But the kit makes it really easy to do. You take some foam core board, and then you tape on that the pattern. It would look like this. And then on top of that, you put a piece of seam steam, two-sided seam steam 2, so it's adhesive on both sides. And you peel the protective paper off the top of the piece of seam steam. And so now you have your pattern, you have your piece of seam steam with sticky side up, and you start cutting and putting in your little squares of fabric. These squares start out at 3/8 of an inch square. Now you could take a ruler and do all that, but we did bring in this sweet little tool that is 3/8 of an inch lines that you can put your rotary cutter in and cut it and then turn it and cut so that you get your squares. So this makes it very quick and easy to do, and you don't need really much fabric. If you can imagine a piece of red fabric about this size that would fit, now you're going to want some different colors. And you want to use batiks because they don't ravel so much, and that makes it important as you're trying to get all these little pieces squared. You don't want lots of little stray ravels coming off of your fabric. You use your pattern as a guide, and you start placing your fabrics on the seam steam and it's sticky, so they pretty well stay in place. The more you work, the little less sticky it gets, but you just keep working on it. Once you get them all in place, then you iron them down, and they'll stay put. So just kind of work with them like that. So you get them all in place, you iron them down, and now remember this is two-sided seam steam, so you peel off the back side, and then you put a piece of fabric back there that I use beige fabric. I thought a lot about maybe using black. I thought that would be really would make it pop. But then it's also going to show a lot of the irregularities that you might have in your design, whether you didn't quite get a space filled or you have too big of a space, so I went with the beige. And you iron that on the back, and then you put a piece of really fine tulle on the top and sew that down, and then you frame it. Once you have that all done, you quilt, and you quilt along the inside lines of the grout, so to speak. You just do some quilting. If you can look on the back, you can see better how it was quilted. And I actually did a quilt as you go for the frame. So I had the piece down, and then I put the binding on, quilt as you go, and then put the other piece around the frame around it. Easy, quick to do that. This is a project that you can do in a car, you can do watching TV. All you're doing is sticking these little pieces of fabric all over this board in the right orientation and in the right place. We brought in the Valentine's kit. It includes the one piece of seam steam. It includes the pattern and the netting. The cutting tool is separate, and that's a separate purchase, so we have that in as well. And then there's additional patterns that you might want to look at and see if you would want something else or instead of or as well as the heart. So this is a light, fun project, quick and easy to do. A perfect little thing just to hang up on your wall for Valentine's Day. I told you in the beginning that we had some Thanksgiving projects to show you, even though this is Thanksgiving week that you're seeing this, so probably they're not going to happen for you this year. But, get the pattern and start working on it for next year, because this particular one is called The Great Pumpkin Harvest by Saginaw Street Quilts. This is a raw edge applique table runner that has some pumpkins and some crows and some vines appliqued on, and then just some 5-inch squares that make up the center and some smaller ones that make up the sides. I cut this appliques out with my scanning cut, so I have a nice clean edge. And I use Missy Fuse on the back because I've been a fan of Missy Fuse ever since I first used it a couple of years ago. The quilting that I did, I got to tell you, I got a 10 needle. I got the new 10 needle when it came out in August. And then they came out with that magnetic quilting frame. And oh my gosh, if you have a luminaire or you have a 10 needle, a brother 10 needle, you must get the magnetic quilting frame because it is the best thing since sliced bread, literally. I love it. It holds your quilt sandwich so nice and tight, and it's so easy to move it down to do the next section. It was a piece of cake to quilt this in my embroidery machine. The pattern that I used to quilt it are just some pumpkins from a quilt design that was by an OESD Urban Elements collection. They had a collection that was several quilt designs. They had several different quilting collections within that. Christmas, Halloween, kids, floral, a whole bunch of different ones. They were perfect for machine embroidery quilting. I quilted it with white thread, and I have mixed feelings about that. Some people say, we can't really tell that it's white. When you see the close-up here, you'll see that it is white. And I didn't know whether it really kind of distracted from the pumpkins, and perhaps transparent thread would have been better. But it's still a beautiful table runner. It's going to look great on my Thanksgiving table next year, because it's got to go around to all the stores this year. So be sure you go into the stores and take a look at it close up, and you'll see the Great Pumpkin Harvest by Saginaw Street Quilts. My second Thanksgiving table runner is called Floating Peaks by Atkinson Designs. And I really like the look of this table runner, and I like the borders that were made, triangles and the trapezoids that are in there. And so I decided I would also make it a Thanksgiving table runner, and I made it twice as long as the pattern called for. So I'm only going to show you half of it because it's twice as long, and my arms aren't that long. But so this is what I did, and I used the quilting pattern from a Autumn Bounty collection from Anita Good Design. So that's what this is, and I just again used my wonderful magnetic quilting brain, put it in my tin needle, and then quilted this pattern out and just moved it down, 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 down until the whole thing was quilted. Very easy to do and very quick. Now granted, this is another one of these Thanksgiving things that we don't have time, maybe not have time to make this year, although this really doesn't take very long. But think of this in Christmas colors or spring colors. Any kind of color combination would make a beautiful table runner with this pattern. And it's very easy to make. It is layer cake friendly. Just layer cake package to make it, or of course you can cut your own. So this is the Floating Peaks from Atkinson Designs. Another book that I brought in for this month is called Whimsical Wool Applique. I just think that wool as an applique media is stunning. I had done an Media Good Design, it was primitive Christmas in wool, and it was beautiful. And so when I saw this Whimsical Wool applique, I thought, well, this is great. And I really like some of the pictures on the front. It has some great designs in here. We got some with bugs, lots of different flowers, and then the instructions are excellent. She gives you instructions on the materials that you need, how to cut it, how to piece it, how to applique it, and then how to finish it off. So very good instructions in the book on how to do everything. I did 2 projects out of this book. The first of which is this Flower Power Pillow. And this is my version of it. This is a Flower Power Pillow with all wool applique on cotton. Tracy had a great idea when we were talking about this, because I was trying to decide what to use for the sashing in the blocks. And she said, well, I was thinking about polka dots or stripes. And she said, well, wouldn't stripes look good on a diagonal, if you can find that? Well, I couldn't find that, but I can cut stripes on the bias and get the diagonal stripes. So that's what I did for the sashing. I like the idea of quilting this or appliquing this with blanket stitch in black, rather than trying to match up the colors of the flowers. And so that's what I did, because I think it really makes the flowers stand out, especially with the stripe sashing. And then the pom-poms just kind of set it all off. The instructions are complete for how to make the pillow, in addition to how to make the cover of it. This is a 24-inch pillow with a 24-inch cover. And I found that it was a little, I think I would have rather had maybe a 26-inch pillow inside to fill it out a little more. And she does show in the book that she just quilted the sashing, and I didn't do that. And that would have also helped it just kind of be filled out a little bit better. So this is the Flower Power Pillow. We brought in some wool for you to use in your own creations of whimsical wool appliques. These are charm squares, and there's some different really bright colors to use. Now, one note of caution, on the Flower Power Pillow, you really have to orient your petals in order to get them in a 5-inch square. But the other ones you can pretty well get in the 5-inch square. So these are a good place to start, and then you can find some other colorful wools here and there and make your own whimsical wool appliques. I also did this cute little wall hanging, but that's for the birds. And again, these are all wool appliques with just a simple cotton border. There's 5 blocks of birds in this, and then you just sew them together without anything in the center. So it looks like all one panel. I use the quilt frame and my design center and my tin needle to do the stippling around each bird without actually covering up the birds. And then I found in the new tin needles, they have the ability to make a quilt frame of any size up to 113 inches or something like that. And so I used that technique to do the border of these swirls. So that worked out really, really well. It matched up, top to bottom, front to back, and came out really nice. So this is the Whimsical wool applique, and this is the bird. This is for the birds. A few months ago, I had asked Mallory to get me this pattern. It's called the crisscross apron, because I thought it would make a really nice, so fun apron to show. And then, of course, as the holidays drew near, guess what? It's got Christmas and Thanksgiving theme to it. What I really like about this is it only takes a yard of fabric for the outside, and it's a reversible apron, and so the back side of it also takes a yard of fabric. So 2 yards total. It's one pattern piece for the main part, plus the pockets, and then this little contrasting strap at the top. Very quick and easy to cut out. In fact, when you cut out the apron, the pocket is in the bib part of what you cut out of the pattern for the, this part becomes the pocket. So I made this, and I thought my mother-in-law, who rest her soul, but she loved these kinds of things, as did my mom. She loved these kinds of aprons. And I thought, what a wonderful thing to make for somebody that you know that would like this kind of apron for the holidays. So this is a reversible apron. So I have Thanksgiving fabric on one side and Christmas fabric on the other. It's got pockets on both sides. I made this while I was traveling, and so I didn't, if I had been home, I would have put some pretty embroidery on the pockets because they're perfect for that. And then this contrasting band, you could even put some pretty little embroidery or some kind of little border on that. This is a crisscross apron, and so there's no ties, no buttons, no zippers, nothing. You just slip it on, and this is like a little trick. So you just slip it on, put your arms through, and you would adjust the size based on where you put the fabric on the fold, because this is cut on the fold here and then the side. So you would just move it over off the fold a little bit if you wanted it a little bit narrower. Or you could make these shoulder pieces a little bit shorter if you need to bring it up a little bit. It is simply hemmed, but rather than being, of course you sew it right sides together all the way around, except for the hem. And they recommend leaving the hem open. You could close it, but then you can use it like to carry something in if you needed to. They show you carrying your vegetables in your vegetable garden, from your vegetable garden in the apron, like that. So this is a crisscross apron done in both Christmas and Thanksgiving fabrics. One of the Christmas quilts I made for November So Fun is this quilt from Cotton Street Commons. It's called So This Is Christmas. And I really was taken by this when I saw the pattern because I love the idea of these gingham check reindeer on this quilt. The reindeer are appliqued, and in her instructions they are raw edge applique. And I'm not really all that comfortable with completely raw edge applique, so I went ahead and blanket stitched around the reindeer, and then I just ran a running stitch along the antlers and the legs to make sure that they stayed in place. If you're going to do raw edge applique, your quilting has to be a lot denser to make sure that it holds all that applique down. The stars, the trees are all pieced, and it was interesting in her pattern. Normally you would think that this is a triangle, and you cut the triangle, and these are triangles or trapezoids, and you cut them. But she actually provided the pattern pieces for the stars and the trees, and she had the edges mitered in such a way so that when you use that pattern to cut your pieces out, when you sewed it together, it went together really, really well, and it made really nice clean points that you could have in your piecing. I think that was a little bit harder way to do it, because you have to use that template to cut, and it's a paper template to cut out all your pieces, which was a little bit tedious as opposed to being, hey, we have a rotary cutter and a ruler that you could just swipe and go. So that's something to look at when you do the pattern, whether or not you want to use her template or whether you want to find the appropriate triangle or ruler to make the pieces that you go. There's a lot of piecing in the white part that you don't really see because it gives you that floating look of the stars and everything and the trees. So there's several seams of the white fabric in the background. The fabric background that I used was called Merriment. I believe it's a Moda fabric, and it's a couple years old now. So whether or not I had to search around a little bit to find it. And then it was just a standard black gingham for the reindeer. And she used 3 different colors of green for the trees. One piece, a different color for the top, middle, or bottom, and I just made it all the same, just easier. When I quilted this, I used some reindeer and some kind of trees that kind of matched what was in the quilt. And I think if I had it to do over again, I probably would have condensed the quilting a little bit. I think it's a little bit loose. I used my long arm and I used my robotics, and I had this pattern that is the trees and the reindeers, and I believe I used 3 patterns across and probably should have used 4. And that would have just brought the quilting in a little bit. This is Christmas by Cotton Street Commons. You might remember when I did So Fun last year, I did a Cat's Meow from Lunchbox Quilts. All these pretty little cats done in batik fabrics. And this is along the same lines, only instead of cute little cats, we have cute little dinosaurs. And this is called Quiltosaurus by Lunchbox Quilts, and it's a CD of embroidery designs. Of course, all the formats are available to make these blocks. There's 8 different dinosaurs. The CD includes the name, the footprints, and of course the dinosaur itself. With all the instructions on cutting to get the quilt made. So a few of the things, Lunchbox Quilts also provides a template, which is a transparency that you can mark the corners of your blocks once you've embroidered them to know what size to cut them to in order to fit them in the quilt, the proper size. We were only able to get 1 set of the Quiltosaurus placement transparencies. So first come, first served on that one. However, if you do want to do this quilt and didn't get a chance to get those templates, what you can do is, if your machine allows you to put a basting stitch around the block, you can set that up to sew a basting stitch, and then so now your design is centered inside of that basting stitch, and then you can use the size that they tell you to cut it to using that basting stitch to keep it centered. So that works really, really well to do it that way. On my machine, you just have to say, I want you to add a basting stitch around the design, and you can even just specify how far from the design you want the stitch to be. Another way to center your blocks is to use the Kimberbill orange pop rulers. We have them available in both square and rectangular size. They are a template that enable you to get things centered within a certain size. So you can use those as well. If you can't get the Quiltosaurus templates, or your machine doesn't do the basting border, that's another option. To quilt this, I used a couple different things on my long arm. I used the dinosaur footprints here, and then just some kind of meander around these blocks, because the footprints pattern I had wouldn't look good, this size, so I had to do a little bit different thing there. And then I used my wonderful, I know y'all probably get sick of hearing about it, but that wonderful magnetic frame to quilt the stippling inside the dinosaur blocks. And to do that, you take the design and you add that design to my design center as an outline. And then you create a square that's this size. And then in my design centers, you tell it I want to stipple in between the dinosaur and that frame. And it'll keep all your stippling around the dinosaur, but inside the frame. So you sort of have 2 containers in my design center. One, the container is the square that confines the stippling to be inside that square. The other container is the dinosaur outline, which keeps the stippling from coming inside of that, so you don't stipple on top of your applique. Very easy to do, very quick, particularly if you already have an embroidered design to start with and to do that. So that's how I did the stippling on inside each of the quilt blocks for the dinosaurs. So this is Lunchbox Quilts, Quiltosaurus, and we have those available for you to make your own favorite dinosaur quilt for your own favorite dinosaur lover. Next up is a small quilt called the Tree Farm. It's another Saginaw Street Quilts pattern. And this is actually one of the first things that I made for So Fun, for November So Fun this year. And I really had a lot of fun making this. It was kind of a different technique for me to do. and I really enjoyed it. So to make this quilt, you need 4 different patterns of 4 different colors of fabric. So 4 different greens, 4 different blacks, 4 different browns, 4 different whites is what I got. And I use batiks. And you start off with, and you need 3/8 of a yard of each one of those. So it's basically 16 different pieces of fabric, right? And so you start off and you cut some these rectangles, and then the other piece, you cut 2 rectangles out of the 3/8 of a yard, and then what's remaining will end up being the sashing around each block down the road when you get to the sashing part. So you have a rectangle, and you use the 45-degree spiderweb ruler and mark and make a triangle down the center, and then cut on either side of the triangle. So you end up with 3 pieces out of each block. The left part, the right part, and the center triangle. You bundle all those, you bundle them together, the colors together, and set them aside. And those little alphabets would be great as markers to be able to keep your pieces straight. So now you have it, and you stack up the 4 you stack up the 4 colors, the 4 browns, the 4 blacks, the 4 greens, the 4 whites, and and then you make these cuts, okay? So now you have a stack of 4 different brown fabrics that have this shape, and then you have 4 different browns that are the centers of the trees, the triangles, right? So what you do then is take the triangles, set them aside, and then for these side pieces, you take the top piece and move it to the bottom of the stack. So now the side pieces are going to be different. And you continue to do that for each one of those stacks. You also do the same thing for the centers. And then you mix and match your centers with your side pieces depending, do you want the green to show with the brown? Do you want the white and the green? How you want your trees to go. Now in the original pattern of the tree farm, she used blue, gray, white, and black. And I didn't want to use blue. I wanted to use green. And I couldn't find any grays that I really liked, so that's why I went with the brown. But I got to thinking later, once I had it made, that wouldn't this be pretty if we used reds, greens, whites, and golds as the different colors in the quilt. So once you get these pieces made, then you do some slicing of your trees to get the angles. And she gave some suggestions of how far down you come from the top, and you make a dot to indicate where you're going to slice across that center triangle. And I use these great chalk marking pencils from Roxanne that we brought in that I really like to make the dots to show where I'm going to cut. I recommend that you follow her recommendations on the spacing for where you make the dots to make the diagonal slashes across the blocks. Because I thought, well, I'm going to do that once, but I'm going to do my own thing. And I found that when I did that, depending on your measurements, you might have trouble with the tops of the trees looking a little wacky. And so I had to adjust them a little bit, otherwise they were completely disassociated from the rest of the tree, which didn't make any sense. So I had to adjust a little bit. Her initial measurements come out just fine to make those points at the top come out where they're supposed to be. So that's just something to look out for. I quilted this with just some Christmas trees that kind of look a little bit like these lopsided trees. And I used black thread, which I kind of like the way that looks on that. This quilt is really pretty easy to make. It's a little bit, reading her instructions are good, but it takes a couple minutes just to understand what she's doing as you're moving these pieces. You have all of these sashing pieces, you have these side pieces, you have the tree pieces, and you're going to move them from one level of the stack to another so that each tree is different. And that's your goal here, so that they're all different. There's always a green and a brown tree, but they're different because they stack differently, and that's kind of the point of it. So this is the Tree Farm by Saginaw Street Quilts, and I think it's a lovely Christmas quilt. This quilt is called Step Into Christmas by Abby Lane Quilts. Last year for So Fun, I think it was in October when I did So Fun, I did a quilt from Abby Lane Quilts called Christmas Tiramisu. I really like their patterns. They're a lot of fun to make and easy to make. This one was really neat because it has a lot of applique, it has jelly roll, it has some piecing, and it came out really, really nice. I love the Christmas colors in this. I want to talk a little bit about the construction of it because you have to be able to cut out some large trees and then get them quilted. You have these big peppermints on the corners and get them quilted along with the applique color that goes to the peppermint. And then I just used a spiral to quilt those down. I did do a blanket stitch around each of the large appliques. And then I made these freestanding peppermint candies. At first I thought I'll put buttons on there, but I thought, well, no, if it's a quilt, you're not going to want to put buttons on there. And then I thought, well, I'm going to make some embroidered ones. And I think I would have done that if I had thought about that before I quilted it, but then I didn't want the embroidery going through the back side of the quilt. So I finally decided to do it a little bit about the way that she said to do it, which what she has you do in the instructions is to take a piece of white fabric, add a piece of batting on the top, add a piece of another white fabric on top of the batting, and then put in these pieces of green or red to make the peppermints, and then do a spiral quilt around it. But she never in her instructions talk about how you finish the edges. And I believe she just left them raw, which to me would be weird because you'd be seeing the batting and the raw edge of the fabric all the way around. So I just digitized these in my Floriani software, and then just use a satin stitch around the edges. Put them on wash away stabilizer so that I could wash it away when I was done, and made these freestanding peppermints that just come on like buttons. I just did a little zigzag stitch in the center. And I used white because I kind of wanted I didn't want the green or the red to go all the way to the center. I wanted that white in the middle like it's in the corners. This takes, I believe it's 27 jelly roll strips in order to do these parts that are on the sides. And so we have some jelly rolls. It's exactly this fabric that I used in here. We have some jelly roll rolls that will be available if you want to make a quilt just like this one. And then for the quilting on this, I put the quilt on my long arm, but I didn't want to quilt over the peppermints. And so I just did a meander around the peppermints. I did a meander around the trees. But then I wanted some kind of pattern in these blocks, and there's some patterns that look like little peppermint candies that are quilted in the jelly roll pieces of this. And then in the trees themselves, I started off trying just to do kind of echo stitching interior, just getting smaller and smaller triangles. And I just did that on my FOF, and I did not like the way that looked. So pull all that out. And then I used my, guess what? My magnetic frame on my 10 needle, and just used one of the fills that they had available, and defined this triangle, filled it with this pattern, defined this next piece, filled it with a pattern, etc., in order to get this tree completely quilted with this pattern, which is a diamond shape. It's got some little stars in the corners. Can't quite see those. The trick to that is to line up the pattern from one hooping to the next as you go down. And with a camera on the thin needle or on the brother, or guess what, on a FOF that's coming out next year, it's pretty easy to do. So it's pretty easy to make those things line up and then be able to go from hooping to hooping and have your quilt in the center of the tree look really nice. This is Step Into Christmas by Abby Lane Quilts. So that's all the projects that I have for you today. It's been quite a year, hasn't it? And we're not quite done with the year yet, though. And, normally in December we'd be doing our Christmas open houses. So we're working with the other So Fun presenters and Rob to make sure we have some special virtual open house to show you in December. So stay tuned about what that's going to look like and when. I will tell you, however, that I would like it if you could send us some pictures. We always do show and tell at every So Fun. We also do show and tell, of course, at the Christmas open houses. And we would like to incorporate those into our open house video. You'll see some information about where you can send your pictures. If you'll send those, not only will you be eligible for some drawings that Rob's going to do, but also we'll incorporate them into our So Fun video for December. And one more thing. It is Christmas, and I've been trying to think of some fun things, stocking stuffers that are sewing themed that you might enjoy purchasing for yourself or for someone you love. And I came across these So Charming 6 wine charms. This is Sassy Stitcher, Stitchy Woman, Quirky Quilter, Material Girl, Queen of UFOs, and Sew Sister. So these are the different tags that are on these wine charms. And certainly this is, if there was any year that we needed to drink some wine, it'd be 2020. But if you're not a wine drinker, what a great tag these make for your quilting rulers. You put them in the little hole where you hang it, and that way if you take it to a class or take it somewhere, it'd be easy to identify which one is yours. So we have these available as well, the So Charming wine charms. That's all for today, and we sure do thank you for joining us and for being patient with us this year as we try to get what So Fun looks like in 2020 and probably for a while in 2021. What that looks like down the road, we're not sure, but we certainly know to start off with, we're going to be doing the same thing we're doing this year, the virtual So Fun, the road shows in the stores, depending on when your store gets that for the next few weeks. So check your email, check Facebook, find out when these quilts will be available for you to actually look at in the store, and come see us. Thanks a lot.